Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Leo Vance always believed he had built something indestructible with Victoria. 10 years of marriage. A high-rise apartment in Chicago with a view that cut through the clouds. Careers that other people envied. A partnership that, from the outside, ran with the silent, flawless precision of a luxury watch. He was a brand strategist. He built identities for corporations, shaping perception into reality. She was a mergers and acquisitions lawyer at one of the city's most formidable firms. He built images. She built empires. Victoria, 36 years old, was a force of nature encased in bespoke suits and quiet confidence. They didn't have children. A mutual, unspoken decision that had solidified over time. Their investments were in experiences. Michelin-star dinners where the plates looked like art. Spontaneous trips to Milan or Tokyo. A social calendar filled with gallery openings and charity galas that connected them to the city's elite. Leo had always respected her ambition. Her independence. He never questioned the frequent business trips, the late nights that bled into early mornings at the office. Trust, he thought, was the foundation. The steel frame holding it all up. Or at least, that's what he told himself until that Thursday. The day the foundation turned out to be sand. She came home around 9 that evening. Later than usual, but not unheard of. He heard the familiar click of the door, the soft thud of her briefcase hitting the entryway console. The sigh of her heels being kicked off onto the marble floor. Leo was in the living room, sketching out a brand concept on his tablet. The city lights of Chicago glittered below, a silent, sprawling galaxy. Usually, she would walk in, slide onto the sofa beside him, and rest her head on his shoulder for a moment. A silent ritual. A return. Tonight, she did not. She stood in the archway, her arms crossed over her chest. A posture he recognized. It was her courtroom stance. Defensive. Impenetrable. She delivered the words as if she were reading from a prepared statement. I need to figure out who I am. Without you. Her voice was flat. Devoid of emotion. I think we should take some time apart. Leo looked up from the screen, the lines of his design blurring. A wave of static filled his ears. He was certain he had misheard. The words made no sense in this room, in this life he had so carefully constructed. What? A small, impatient sigh escaped her lips. The kind of sigh she used when explaining a complex legal point to a junior associate. I need space, Leo. I need to find myself. You know? Grow as a person. Understand my true essence without always being defined as part of a couple. Every word was a cliché. The thought struck him with the force of a physical blow. A cheap, self-help cliché, completely disconnected from the woman standing before him. The floor seemed to drop away from his feet. There had been no fight. No crisis. No warning sign that a wrecking ball was about to swing through their living room. He tried to process. To make it logical. Victoria, where is this coming from? Did something happen? We can talk about what you're feeling. She shook her head, a quick, dismissive gesture. This isn't about you, Leo, it's about me. I need this. I've already rented a small apartment in the West Loop. I'm moving some things this weekend. The coldness. The finality. The fact that she had planned this. Rented an apartment. Made arrangements. All without a single conversation. This wasn't a request for his input. It was a press release announcing a decision that had already been made. Anger, hot and acidic, rose in his throat. He swallowed it down, forcing his voice to remain level. How long? How long have you been thinking about this? Victoria finally broke eye contact, her gaze drifting towards the glittering city below. A few months, but it only became clear recently. What I needed to do. A few months. The words echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the room. For months, she had been planning her escape. While sleeping beside him every night. While making plans for their anniversary trip to Lisbon. While smiling across a dinner table, pretending that everything was fine, a lie, a performance. That night, she slept in the guest room. Peacefully, he imagined. As if she had done nothing more than announce a change in her schedule. Leo, on the other hand, did not close his eyes. He lay in their king-sized bed, which now felt as vast and empty as a desert. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing, replaying every conversation, every interaction, every shared silence of the last few months. Something was fundamentally wrong. People didn't just detonate a 10-year marriage because they needed to find themselves. That wasn't a reason. It was an excuse. And Leo was going to find out what it was hiding. The night bled into a gray, featureless morning. As Leo lay there, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up, his mind became an interrogation room. He was the detective, and the last 2 years of his marriage were the suspect. He began to connect the dots. Little things. Anomalies he had dismissed at the time. The business trips. They had always been a part of her job, but over the last 2 years, they had become more frequent. A weekend conference in San Francisco. A 3-day summit in New York. He had never questioned them. He was proud of her success. Now, he saw them differently. He saw them as opportunities. The phone. Her constant companion. He remembered moments. Walking into the room and seeing her quickly swipe a message away. The screen going dark. When he'd asked, she'd laughed it off. Just office gossip. You'd be bored. He had believed her. Why wouldn't he? The weekend she was supposedly buried in paperwork for a huge merger. She had come home on Sunday night exhausted, but with a strange sparkle in her eyes, a vibrancy that had nothing to do with legal documents. He'd thought it was the thrill of a professional victory. Now, he wondered what kind of victory it really was. And the lingerie. 3 weeks ago, he'd found it in her drawer while looking for a pair of socks. A delicate, expensive black lace set. The tags were still on. When he'd teased her about it, she'd said she bought it just to feel good about herself, a private confidence boost. He had found it charming. Another lie. Another piece of the puzzle that was now snapping into place with sickening clarity. His own insecurities began to crawl out from the dark corners of his mind. Was he the problem? He was successful, yes. His branding agency was respected. But his world was one of colors, fonts, and concepts. Her world was one of billion-dollar deals, of power and ruthless negotiation. At her firm's parties, he often felt like an accessory. Victoria's husband. The creative type. She was the one they watched, the one they gravitated towards. Had he become boring? Predictable? Was he not enough? The thought was a venomous whisper, poisoning his self-worth. She left for the office that morning before he was even out of bed. No coffee together, no goodbye. Just the soft click of the door closing behind her, sealing him inside their silent, fractured home. That was the moment his grief hardened into resolve. He would not be the passive, accepting husband. He would not sit here and wait for answers she had no intention of giving. He would not be made a fool of. He grabbed his phone, his fingers moving with a cold, detached purpose. He opened a private browser. Private investigators. Chicago, dozens of names appeared. He scanned through them, looking for something specific. Not cheap or flashy. He needed professional. Discreet. Clinical. He found it. Gideon Trace Investigations. Specializing in marital infidelity and corporate espionage. The website was minimalist, professional. Filled with testimonials from anonymous clients praising Gideon's efficiency and discretion. They spoke of painful but necessary truths. Leo dialed the number before he could second-guess himself. A deep, calm voice answered on the second ring. Gideon speaking. Leo explained the situation. He stripped it of all emotion, presenting it like a case brief. The sudden request for separation. The vague, unbelievable excuses. His growing suspicions. His need for the truth. The absolute truth, no matter how ugly. Gideon listened without interruption. When Leo was finished, there was a brief pause. I understand your situation completely, Mr. Vance. I've handled cases like this for 15 years. When a spouse suddenly needs to find themselves, it usually means they've already found someone else. I can begin surveillance today. I'll need some basic information. Your wife's routine, office address, vehicle description. Leo provided everything. Victoria's full name. Her office at the Aeon Center. Her black Mercedes sedan, license plate number committed to memory. Her typical schedule. I guarantee absolute discretion, Gideon said, his voice a calm reassurance in the chaos of Leo's mind. If there is something to find, I will find it. You will be updated daily. The call ended. Leo stood by the window, looking down at the city. It looked the same as it had yesterday. But everything had changed. The game was afoot. And he was no longer just a player. He was watching the board. The next 3 days were a masterclass in silent torture. Leo went through the motions of his life. He worked on his projects, participated in conference calls, and ate dinners alone in the cavernous silence of their apartment. He and Victoria were like ghosts haunting the same space. She spent more and more time away, claiming she was moving things to her new place or working late. She barely spoke to him. Always in a hurry. Always armed with a plausible excuse. He didn't confront her. He didn't ask questions. He just watched. And waited. The first report arrived on the second day. An encrypted email with a single attachment. Gideon's report was concise. Factual. Devoid of emotion. Subject: Victoria Vance. Surveillance Day 1. 6:15 p.m., subject left her office building. 6:40 p.m., subject did not drive toward the West Loop, where she claimed her new apartment was located. She drove to the Gold Coast. 6:55 p.m., subject parked in the underground garage of the Drake Hotel. She proceeded to the main lobby. The attachment was a photograph. Taken discreetly from across the lobby. Victoria was standing near the elevators, checking her reflection in a mirrored pillar. She was dressed impeccably, far too elegantly for an evening of moving boxes. She looked expectant. Gideon's report continued. 7:05 p.m. Subject met a male individual at the entrance to the Cock Door Bar. He was tall, mid-50s, with graying hair and wearing an expensive suit. They greeted each other with a kiss. The kiss was not professional. Attached was a second photograph. A clearer shot, taken through a window. The man's face was visible. Leo didn't recognize him. They were holding hands on a small table. Subject and the male individual remained in the bar for 2 hours before taking the elevator upstairs. The second report, which arrived the following day, was even more devastating. Gideon was ruthlessly efficient. Subject: Identity of male associate. The individual is Preston Croft. Age 54. Senior partner at the same law firm as your wife, Kirkland and Ellis. Status: married for 22 years. 2 adult children. Resides in Lincoln Park. Reputation: one of Chicago's most respected M&A attorneys. Impeccable public profile. An affair with her married boss. Gideon had done more than just identify him. He had done a preliminary financial trace. Records Julian preferred not to question how he obtained. Credit card statements. Expensive dinners at Alinea and Oriole, always on the nights Victoria claimed to be at a working dinner. Reservations at boutique hotels. The Langham. The Peninsula. Some in Chicago, others in cities she had visited for conferences. New York. San Francisco. The pattern was undeniable. It was a well-oiled machine of deceit. But the worst was yet to come. On the third day, Gideon called him. "I have the final report," he said. "This is not something I want to send over email. Can you meet?" They met at a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of them frequented. Gideon, a man whose face was as nondescript as his name, slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "You'll want to brace yourself for this, Leo," he said, his calm voice carrying a rare note of gravity. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Not just from the last few days. Gideon, through methods Leo didn't ask about, had unearthed a digital trail. Photos from social media accounts of friends, location data from older posts, booking confirmations. They spanned years. Not months. At least 2 years. Victoria and Preston on a tropical beach, her head on his shoulder. Victoria and Preston at a winery in Napa Valley, clinking wine glasses, a photo she had told him was from a corporate retreat. Victoria and Preston holding hands while walking through Central Park, a trip she had claimed was for a grueling deposition. One photo made Leo's stomach clench so hard he thought he might be sick. It was them on the balcony of a resort in Maui. She was wearing a flowing, deep blue dress. He remembered that dress. He remembered helping her pick it out for a supposed legal conference in Hawaii 2 years earlier. He remembered telling her how beautiful she looked in it. In the photo, she was wrapped in Preston's arms. They were watching the sunset, their faces radiating a look of complete, comfortable intimacy. The look of a long-term couple. Gideon had extracted the metadata. The photo was taken 2 years ago. 2 years. 2 years of elaborate lies. 2 years of fake business trips and phantom work sessions that were actually romantic getaways. 2 years of him playing the role of the supportive, trusting husband while she lived a completely separate life. Nausea rose in his throat. Gideon spoke again, his voice pulling Leo from the wreckage. There's more. Preston Croft is the leading candidate to become the next managing partner of the firm's Chicago office, but the firm has a strict, zero-tolerance ethics policy against relationships between partners and subordinate attorneys. Especially when one or both are married. If this gets out, it will destroy both of their careers. Leo looked at the photos spread across the table. The undeniable, high-resolution proof of a 2-year betrayal. The anger he felt was no longer hot. It was cold. Crystalline. Perfect in its clarity. He finally had the truth. Now, he knew exactly what he was going to do with it. That night, when Victoria came home, Leo was waiting for him. He was sitting in the living room, in the same spot where she had shattered his world just a few days ago. The city lights twinkled behind him, oblivious. On the glass coffee table in front of him sat a sleek, black leather folder. She walked in, not even glancing at him, heading straight for the bedroom to pack another bag for her new apartment. "Victoria," he said. His voice was calm. So calm it surprised even himself. "I need to talk to you." She returned to the living room, a flicker of impatience in her eyes. "Leo, we've already been over this. There's nothing left to discuss." He slowly, deliberately, opened the folder. "Actually," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "There is. I've spent the last few days figuring out who you really are." He began placing the photos on the table. One by one, creating a visual timeline of her betrayal. The Maui photo. The San Francisco photo. The Drake Hotel photo from 3 days earlier. The photo of her kissing Preston at the entrance to a hotel in New York. Victoria's face was a canvas of transforming emotions. First, confusion, as her brain tried to process what she was seeing. Then, a sickening wave of recognition, her eyes widening in horror. And finally, pure, unadulterated panic, as the blood drained from her face, leaving her skin ashen. "Leo, where did you get these?" Her voice trembled. All that rehearsed, corporate confidence had instantly evaporated. He leaned forward, never breaking eye contact. "I hired a private investigator. I thought it was strange that a woman who has never had an identity crisis in her life suddenly needed to find herself. And I was right to be suspicious." He let the words hang in the air. 2 years, Victoria. For 2 years, you've been sleeping with Preston Croft. While I sat here like an idiot, believing every single lie that came out of your mouth." She tried to regain control, to find a defense, but her hands were shaking as she picked up one of the photos. "You spied on me, you hired someone to follow me?" The indignation in her voice would have been comical if the situation weren't so tragic. Leo let out a short, dry laugh. It was a sound with no humor in it. "Are you seriously trying to make me the villain here? For discovering that you're a liar and a cheat? Really? That's your play?" She dropped the photo as if it had burned her. She ran her hands over her face, her composure crumbling. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. Preston and we connected on a level." Leo raised his hand, a sharp, cutting gesture. "Spare me the romantic novelization. I don't want to hear about your connection or your chemistry or any other pathetic excuse you've cooked up to justify destroying our marriage." She tried a different tactic. Tears. Real or manufactured, he couldn't tell. And he didn't care. "Leo, I am so sorry. I truly am. I lost my way. But we can fix this. We can go to therapy. I can end it with Preston. We can start over." He looked at her, and for the first time, he felt something close to pity. "Do you honestly believe I would want to stay married to someone capable of deceiving me for 2 years? Someone who could look me in the eye every single night knowing she was sleeping with another man? Someone who planned romantic getaways while pretending to be at work?" His voice rose slightly, the icy calm finally beginning to crack, revealing the raw fury beneath. "You made me look like a fool, Victoria. You let me believe we had something real while you were building a whole parallel life with your married boss." She tried to move toward him, to touch his arm, but he flinched back as if from a hot iron. "Don't touch me." The coldness in his voice stopped her mid-step. He reached back into the folder and pulled out another document. It wasn't a photo. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," he said, his voice returning to its chilling calm. The divorce papers will be served on Monday. Her eyes widened. And there's more. She stared at the document in his hand as if it were a venomous snake. Preston Croft is married, isn't he? Leo continued, his voice relentless. 22 years. 2 kids. You knew that the whole time. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Guilt was written all over her face. I took the liberty, Leo said, his words precise and sharp as shards of glass, of sending a full copy of this dossier to his wife. Catherine, I believe her name is. She deserves to know who she's married to. Just as I deserve to know who I was married to. The shock on Victoria's face was absolute. It was the face of someone watching their world burn to the ground. You didn't. Her voice was a horrified whisper. Oh, I did, he confirmed. And I also sent a copy to your firm's ethics committee. Because you see, I discovered there's a very clear, zero-tolerance policy about these things. Preston was being considered for managing partner, wasn't he? I doubt that promotion is still on the table. Victoria staggered backward, sinking heavily onto the sofa. The strength had gone out of her legs. You've ruined my career, she breathed. You've ruined his career. How could you? Leo felt an icy calm settle over him. A sense of righteous, perfect clarity. Me? I didn't destroy anything. You two destroyed your own careers the moment you decided your affair was more important than your marriages, your families, and your professional ethics. I just turned on the lights. She began to sob then. Genuinely. But they weren't the tears of remorse he had once hoped to see. They were the tears of a failed strategist. The tears of someone who had gambled everything and lost. Preston is going to hate me, she cried. The firm is going to fire me. My reputation. It's gone. Leo picked up the folder and stood, looking down at the wreck of his wife. You should have thought of that before. Oh, and that apartment you rented? You'll be needing it. I want you out of this house by Sunday. I'll stay at a hotel until you're gone. I can't stand to look at your face. He walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. You said you needed to figure out who you are without me. Well, consider your wish granted. You'll have all the time in the world to find yourself. Alone. Because a man like Preston Croft doesn't leave a 22-year marriage and a brilliant career for his mistress. He drops the mistress to try and salvage the wreckage. His words hit her like physical blows. He saw the exact moment she realized he was right. Preston wasn't going to save her. She was utterly, completely on her own. The days that followed were a whirlwind of controlled demolition. Leo's plan, his architecture of revenge, unfolded with brutal efficiency. Catherine Croft, Preston's wife, reached out to him. Her voice on the phone was steady, filled with a cold fury that mirrored his own. She thanked him for his honesty. She confirmed she had already retained Chicago's most ruthless divorce attorney. She was going to make sure Preston paid for every lie. The firm's ethics committee launched a formal investigation. The dossier Leo provided was irrefutable. Preston Croft was placed on immediate, indefinite administrative leave. Internal documents leaked anonymously, though Leo had his suspicions Gideon's work was not yet done, showed that Preston had used firm resources to fund some of his trips with Victoria. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was serious professional misconduct. Victoria was also placed on leave. Rumors ripped through the city's tight-knit legal community like a wildfire. Their carefully constructed social life collapsed overnight. Mutual friends, forced to pick sides, overwhelmingly stood with Leo once the truth came out. His narrative was simple and sympathetic, the betrayed husband. Hers was messy and indefensible. Victoria tried calling him. Several times. He blocked her number. All communication was to go through their lawyers. She attempted to negotiate more favorable divorce terms, but she had no leverage. Leo held all the cards. The evidence of infidelity, her involvement with a married superior at her own firm, everything was in his favor. The process moved quickly. There were no children to consider, only the division of assets. Leo kept the apartment. He had the means to buy out her share, and she was in no position to fight for it. It was, after all, his home. She had merely been a long-term resident. The affair between Victoria and Preston didn't survive a week after the fallout. Just as Leo predicted, Preston dropped her instantly, desperately trying to save his marriage. It was a futile effort. Catherine Croft was merciless. His divorce left him financially devastated. The firm concluded its investigation. While they didn't formally fire a senior partner of Preston's stature, they made his position untenable. He was stripped of his responsibilities, his path to leadership permanently blocked. He was a pariah in his own kingdom. Victoria, being more junior, more replaceable, was subtly but firmly pressured to resign. She did, 2 months after that fateful Thursday. The destruction was total. It was perfect. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized in a brief, cold hearing in a sterile courtroom. Leo and Victoria saw each other for the first time since the night of the unveiling. She looked diminished. Thinner. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a slump of defeat. When the judge's gavel fell, officially dissolving their marriage, she tried to speak to him in the hallway. "Leo, I just wanted to say." He cut her off, his gaze fixed on the elevator at the end of the hall. He didn't look at her. "There's nothing you can say that I want to hear. Good luck with your new life, Victoria." And he walked away. Literally and figuratively. He rebuilt his life, brick by brick. He poured himself into his work, landing major new clients. He traveled, but this time to places he wanted to see. He hiked the rugged landscapes of Patagonia, a place Victoria had always deemed too rustic. He reconnected with old friends he had neglected during the marriage, realizing how much of his social life had revolved around her. He went to therapy. He processed the betrayal, the loss, the anger. He learned that what she did was a reflection of her character, not a measure of his worth. A year after the divorce, he was, by all accounts, thriving. He was genuinely happy, realizing with a start that he had been carrying the dead weight of that marriage on his back for far longer than he had imagined. He had been lonely in his marriage for years without even knowing it. Victoria, he heard, had moved to Portland. She was trying to restart her career at a smaller firm, but her reputation had followed her. The legal community in the Pacific Northwest was smaller than it seemed. Stories traveled. She found work, but it was a shadow of the prestige she once commanded. Preston remained in Chicago, a ghost haunting the halls of the firm he once hoped to lead, trying to rebuild relationships with children who despised him for what he did to their mother. He and Victoria never spoke again, each blaming the other for the disaster they had created together. 2 years after the divorce, Leo was in his office late one night, finalizing a presentation. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He opened it. It was from her. She must have seen photos of him on a mutual acquaintance's social media feed, smiling on a trip to Greece. At a dinner with friends. Clearly happy. Clearly thriving. The message read, "I see you're doing well. I'm glad for you. I've finally figured out who I am without you. It's not who I hoped to be. You were right about everything." Leo read the message once. Then a second time. He felt nothing. A strange, hollow void where anger and pain used to be. She had destroyed a decade of partnership, of trust, of shared history, all for a fantasy that only lasted as long as it remained a secret. Once exposed to the harsh light of real-world consequences, it had collapsed like the paper house it always was. She had found herself, just like she wanted. And she didn't like what she saw. He held his thumb over the screen. Then he deleted the message. And the contact. There was nothing left to say. He turned back to his work, the city lights of Chicago a familiar, comforting presence outside his window. He had won. He had survived. He had rebuilt. But sometimes, in the profound silence of the high-rise apartment that now felt too vast for one person, he would look out at the endless grid of lights and wonder why victory tasted so much like ash. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.